So come on in, grab your seats, and we'll get going. It's just from the energy in the room, it's looking like your first sessions went really well. There's quite a buzz, so we're very, very excited about that. So we're here over the next 2 days to be talking about collective impact. And as we all know, collective impact is a journey toward changing systems that impact lives. It involves thinking differently, and we've started that this morning, seeing the big picture, understanding the system and all its parts. So collective impact demands that we stop trying to apply universal solutions without considering the unique needs of different groups, both those involved in the work and those we serve. To be successful, we have to recognize and honor our differences, or we'll miss critical opportunities to be effective. Inclusion, as we're talking about a lot and we'll continue to talk about over the next 2 days, is integral to collective impact's core principles. A partnership must commit to applying an inclusion lens throughout its work in order to achieve equitable change. A group of colleagues of mine and I attended a collective impact conference in New Hampshire back in 2012 during Hurricane Sandy, so it was really exciting. Dinner the first night was in the dark, but it didn't really matter. We were having a good time. And it was led by this organization called Tamarack Institute. And at that 2-day, maybe 2.5-day conference, we heard a speaker there who for me was personally inspiring. And I learned about the power of perspective and effectiveness of including people with, and this was the term that I heard for the first time at that, people with lived experiences, those affected by the problem in question in developing the solution. The speaker we heard that day was Paul Bourne, and the message he shared has sat with me at every table ever since. Paul is the co-founder and president of Tamarack Institute, a global leader on issues of place, collective impact, and community innovation. He's written 4 books, and each one of you is the lucky recipient of one of his latest book, which is a gift from us to you. You'll get that when you leave the conference. He's been recognized and awarded for his work by the United Nations, and he has a unique personal story as well, which has no doubt shaped the way in which he approaches the world and chooses to apply that experience. So this man is incredible, and we are very, very lucky to have him. I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce and welcome Paul Bourne, our keynote speaker, and he's going to be with us for the next 2 days. Take advantage of this opportunity to have this gentleman in our community. It's amazing. Thank you.
Good morning. Nice to be here. Though I arrived at 3:15 this morning, and my wife is in India, and a long time ago when she agreed to go, she's giving a talk there, and I had said that, okay, I'll do your class. She teaches at the university. And so I had this lovely class on community and food, but then we couldn't switch it when I knew I was coming here. So thank you so much, Amy, for all that you did to get me here, and to the marvelous team at United Way. And Martha, you know, I'm hiring you personally to come and do my funeral.
Got it. I hope sooner than that.
Is that kind of a Vermontonian? What do you call yourselves? Vermontians? Vermonters. Well, I like that. Vermonters. It's nice. It's wonderful to be here, and that you have agreed to come together for a couple of days to talk about collective impact. And I'm just so pleased that I'm able to share with you my story and the passion that we have for this work. And well, I'll tell you more about that in a moment and kind of how we look at it. I love the way that the four partners have come together and that you have almost created like a collective impact to pull that forward. So it feels like a bit of a momentum, like you're wanting to create a large-scale change of the way that you think here. My driver yesterday was driving me back from Montreal to here, and he was just saying what a great place Vermont was. And his point was that I don't think he really knew. He just said, I think we have the most not-for-profits in the United States per capita. Is that true? Yeah. And I said, so that's probably why the quality of life is so good in Vermont. And he had to agree that that was that. I think he was actually going to say that there was a lot of money being spent, but when I told him the quality of life was kind of the other side of that, he was pretty excited. And of course, I mean, I don't know if I've been to a more beautiful place than Stowe to come and have a conference. So I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days together. I want to share with you over the next few days about the work that we have done at the Tamarack Institute. We've been at this for near 20 years. And I'll tell you that early story. But we formed an institute primarily because we wanted to understand how communities change. And we wanted to understand how do we make the change of communities easier. So we often find that when groups collaborate, when they're trying to work together at a large scale, it just feels really hard. And since we're all practitioners, we have felt that. And so we said, somehow this has to be easier and in a sense more fun if this is going to work and if it's going to take off. And then the other one was to try to understand how we could make it more effective. And just generally, because we didn't see collaborative action as having that many outcomes. So the outcome was that we worked better together, and maybe we needed to evolve through that to try to figure out how we move from collaboration to a collective impact. And thus the collective impact work and thinking that came forward was extremely important to us. And when the FSG people, Foundation Strategy Group, John Canio, who wrote the original papers with Mark Kramer, when they read our work, they knew right away that we had been studying this for a very long time and that we had been implementing it. And again, that's my story, and I'll tell it this morning. We resonated so deeply with this way of expressing it, and we have now adopted the collective impact framework as the best way to describe large-scale collaborative action. And so I'm so happy that you're here, that you're working together, and that you're learning together. And I really look forward to spending time in workshops with you as well. I want to encourage you over these next 2 days to get lost and to explore, meet people that you've never met. Don't hang out with your buddies. Go hang out with people you don't know. Go to workshops that you didn't sign up for. I know Amy's just going, what? He didn't say that, did he? Go with an exploration lens. Collective impact is not a yes or no. It's not something you need to adopt and do. But it's something you need to explore. It's an important understanding. It's an important evolution of how we think about community change. So if you're thinking, Paul, I'm just not sold on this getting lost idea, let me tell you a story. A few years ago, we took our 2 children to Italy. Anybody ever done that? Gone to Italy? Yeah. I mean, why would you ever want to leave Vermont, right? So we did this because our oldest was leaving the nest. And we were told that if he was going to leave, he wouldn't ever want to travel with us again. And so we thought we would give this one great big experience as a memory. And we saved for several years for this trip, and we went. Well, he's 25 now, and what we've learned is that as long as you pay for him, he'll always come. So we're getting back from Sorrento, and we're at the Naples train station. Anybody been there? Lonely Planet says, be careful. And we had experienced some weird stuff when we were going, and so here we were sitting in a train car, and my son said, Dad, do you have any water? And it was my job to keep the family hydrated. We all had jobs. And I said, oh, I forgot. And I said, let me go get some. So I jump off the train, go to the machine, the water machine, and I put my euro in, and nothing happens. I pick it up, put it in again, nothing happens. I pick it up, do it again, put it in again, nothing happens. Third time, pick it up, put it in, click. Oh, the water bottle. So the water bottle, I watch the water bottle fall down. I go down to grab it, and I look up, and there goes my train. They said I looked like Mr. Bean running after it, wait for me, But of course, trains don't wait for anyone in Italy. So I was feeling, somewhat dejected. My kids were sort of pressed up against the window, And so I reached back, and I had my wallet. So I thought, that's good. I'll just go buy another ticket. All trains go to Rome. And I would just, get another ticket. As I'm walking along, this porter pulls up. And, you're supposed to be really wary of porters. That's what Lonely Planet tells you about, because you never know who they really are. He pulls up in a kind of a golf cart, and he tells me to get in. And I'm just not having any of it. And he's speaking Italian, and I'm just sort of, no. And finally he convinces me. We get in, and we drive to the furthest corner of the train station, where it's the administration office. He gets out, walks in. There's a glass door, and so I can see what's happening. He goes in, and he starts talking, and all these people come out of their offices, and they're all laughing. And I knew it was at me, huh? So I walk in kind of sheepishly, and they give me another porter, and we walk to a stairwell, and we go down one flight of stairs, and we go down 2 flights of stairs. And as we're going down the 3rd flight of stairs, all I'm thinking at that point, when he asks me for my wallet, I'm just going to give it to him. We get to the bottom of this stairwell, and we come into another platform. I'm kind of taken aback because we're the only people on this platform. And I kind of hold up my ticket, get kind of big, and say, what are we doing here, And he takes my ticket, and he points to the platform above, and he writes down when Marlene and the boys' train was leaving, and then he points down to this one, and he points at when it's leaving and when it's arriving. So Marlene's leaving and arriving, mine leaving and arriving, and guess what? I would get there 3 minutes before them. So these are the high-speed trains that come underneath the train station and keep going. So the train comes a few minutes later. I was really lucky, and he throws me on without a ticket. I'm at the front of the train, and I start walking to the back of the train trying to find a seat. There's literally not a seat to be had. It's packed. They had stopped only for me. As I get to the very back of the train, what do I find? What's at the back of every train? Well, sort of. It's a bar. Yes, it's a bar, right? And there's a big party going on, huh? And everybody's all happy and excited, and I meet some German people. I can speak fluent German, and we start talking, have a wonderful time, and then I proceed to the back of the car because there were no seats there either, and I met this gentleman by the name of Mario, who happened to be an economist from the University of Milan. And he was very much into local-based economics and local community economics, which is a real passion of mine. And I had read all of the work that had been written about the local economy of Italy, particularly the Robert Putnam stuff around how it relates to social capital. So we talked and talked for like 2+ hours, and it was wonderful. Learned so much from him. And as we're pulling into the Rome station, Mario says, look, Paul, I know exactly what track your family's coming in on. I say, hey, I know what car they're in. And we get out and we run toward that track and we run toward the car. And just as we get to the car, there is Marlene and the boys walking down from the car, and I hold up my bottle of water. And I say, sorry I took so long. True story. Get lost for a while today and tomorrow and just experience that. As we do this work of large-scale community change and we do this work of collective impact, getting lost is one of the most important factors in all of this, primarily because we enter into this work so much knowing. We know what to do on almost every issue we're working on. You bring a group of people together and they all know what to do. The truth is, if we really knew what to do, we'd be doing it. So if the problems keep growing and progress is not being made by our organizations on the issue that we're working on, it requires us to move into a place of humility, to get lost, to explore, to change our lens from a lens of knowing to a lens of exploring, to a lens of possibility, to a lens of seeing people in a way that we haven't seen them before. And most importantly, to opening our hearts to one another and trusting one another that together we are better than any one of us individually. That's the power of collective impact, but we can't get there knowing. And I often say, and it's in my last book, Community Conversations, I have a quote saying, the only way that we will ever get to knowing is to first experience unknowing. So we need to get to unknowing together in order for us to be able to get to common or collective knowing. And that just means releasing for a while those things which we hold true, just for a while, in order to find something collective. I want to share with you how I first came to collective impact, or this way of thinking, and it goes back to 1996, a long time ago. We had just been nominated and won an award from the United Nations as one of the 40 best practices in the world. We didn't even know that existed. And this guy, Nicholas Yu, says, I want to fly down from Nairobi and give you this award. And we thought that was pretty great. The media got a hold of it, the politicians got a hold of it, and we had this huge community celebration to welcome him. Around 400 people were there in a very historic building. And we were pretty excited about the award, I mean, on some levels. But we were also having a lot of questions. Well, the award ceremony started, and children sang, and politicians spoke, and Nicholas Yu came up and did his thing. And then I was called up at the end of the session to receive the award and to make a speech. And I started out by thanking everyone for the work that they had done on our behalf, and in some ways we deserved the award. We had helped well over 5,500 people get back into long-term permanent jobs. We had the largest and most successful plant closure team in the country. Average when a plant closes, and this is right around free trade, where a lot of your companies move back home. The average placement rate for closure companies is about 56, 57%. We were 98%. We had actually a 100% placement guarantee. As long as you work with us, we'll help you find a job. We're a not-for-profit, a charity that worked in children's issues. We had workers in every low-income neighborhood. There were 19 of them. And so our results showed a lot of favor. And so on the one level, we said, okay, this all makes sense. But we had been doing some interesting work on our own, and we were kind of looking at our organization's overall effectiveness and cost benefit. So how were we really effective? So were we doing things really well? And were we doing the right things, which is the second question that we were asking. Not just were we doing things really well. So on the doing things very well side, we scored extremely high. People were being helped. They were having individual outcomes. But were we doing the right things? And that was the question that we were asking. And we had brought in people from all around the world to help us understand how we could change the way that we were working. And so when it came time for me to accept the award, I said, on the one hand, it makes a lot of sense that we receive this award today. But with all due respect, I cannot accept this award. And I looked the audience right in the eye, all 400 people who I knew, and I said, do you realize that in the 10-year period for which we are being recognized, that poverty actually increased in our community by 5%? And yes, you can say that was a national phenomenon, right? And we're no different than the rest of the country. But I said, we are the largest economic development organization, and helping the poorest in our community is our responsibility, and we fail. 5% of our population have worse lives now than when we started 10 years ago. And so with that, I cannot accept this award, and I left the stage. You can see how that didn't go over so well. But in the next 6 months, we raised about $1.7 million. Back then, that was a lot of money. From the private sector. We wouldn't accept any government money, which is very unusual in Canada. And we launched what was called Opportunities 2000. And our goal was to rally the community to become the lowest level of poverty in Canada within 4 years. And it was going to be our millennium gift to the world. 1996 to 2000 was our target. Now, we didn't really know how to do this. But we were all a bit United Way junkies. And this isn't why United Way has asked me to come play their card. But we were United Way junkies because, I had worked as a volunteer at United Way. We were funded by the United Way as an agency. I was always the guy that when the company said, not this year, then they would tap me on the shoulder and they say, go, Paul, go make it this year. So I would always go get the guys who didn't give, So we were very interested, and I knew a lot about the structure, but what I loved about the way United Way ran a campaign was, first of all, they ran a campaign, and I love that idea, right? It's a period of time with a beginning and an end, and it's a rally. So we said there's got to be something in that. And what if we did a 4-year rally, right? A 4-year rally rather than like a 4-month rally, which was the key back then. That was number one. Number two, we loved the way that they put together the campaign cabinet, because the campaign cabinet was made up of labor and business, not-for-profit organizations, and community citizens. And so we said, well, what would that look like if we were going to run a campaign for people living in poverty? How do we build a table like that? And that's what inspired for us the multi-sector collaboration work that we become so well known for, and also the lived experience, because we actually got the lived experience idea from the citizen seats on the United Way table. And now often those are kind of high-profile people, but we thought, well, what they're really looking for is people that have credibility with the donors. So who has credibility with people living in poverty? People living in poverty, right? So that's kind of how it all came together in those early days. And so we launched our campaign, and we started running all kinds of programs. I think at the end of the day, we ran 52 different initiatives, including our United Way went out during a campaign and asked the 200 employers that were giving at the time if they would also move one family out of poverty. And 162 not only said they would, but did. It's pretty exciting what started to happen. And what we began to see is a community transforming itself in a very unique way. Well, 2000 came along, and how does one actually know if you've created your goal of the lowest level of poverty? We had helped just over 1,700 families move out of poverty. Our goal was 2,000 by 2000. That's what seemed to be the marker that we needed to do. We had worked intensely in low-income neighborhoods and tried to transform them in a very real way. And that seemed to be working very well. We had lots of people engaged, and that was also very exciting and working well. But of course, you need population-level data. And if you're like us, you don't get population-level data until 2004, right? So in 96 there was a census, 2000 there was a census, 2004 was another census, but they often never released the data of the 2000 census until near 2004. By then our campaign was over and we were off doing other things. What was so interesting, in 2004, there was a 2-page spread in the newspaper that was looking at the reduction of poverty in Canada and was asking the question. It was a newbie reporter. Obviously, they had lost their institutional history around issues. And he was just asking the question on a data level, why was there such a significant reduction in poverty in Waterloo? And why had we become the lowest level of poverty that year? Right? We were just neck and neck with Windsor, which is just across from Detroit. And it was a marvelous paper because it showed that we were the only community in Canada that had ended place-based poverty. That means that those 19 low-income neighborhoods were no longer statistically significant. So that they weren't measured as low income anymore. That didn't mean that there weren't low-income people living in those communities. There were still. But that's the kind of large-scale change that we undertook. I have to say it was the 4 best years of my career. It was exciting to work with people, to feel the momentum, to feel the sense that we were letting go of all of those boundaries that we form as not-for-profits and as governments and as people who care about this work. That we so believe that our work is the right way. And when we start to say, what if we had a common way, right? What would that look like? Shortly thereafter, in 2002, the Tamarack Institute was formed. And our job was, of course, to make the work of community change easier and more effective. But our job was also to try and understand how communities could work differently overall. And back already in those days, and I'm fond of sharing this today as well, we would ask the question of audiences, and I ask this of you. How many of you think that if we all just worked harder, like just a lot harder than we currently are, that things are going to get better? Anybody? How many of you think that if we just write one more report, just get a little bit smarter, that things are going to get better? And how many of you think that if we spend more money, yes, in the short term we will get a kick from spending more money, but in the long term, that's the answer? And maybe it is that we need to spend more money, you know. But I just worked in the province of Alberta, kind of a bit like your Texas, the oil country. And, you know, in that province, 68% of all the children who are yanked from their homes and put into care are Aboriginal children. And yet only 7% of all the children in that province are Aboriginal. And I was asked to go and spend a year exploring with that province what was wrong, what was happening, right? Well, you know, one of the things we found out is that 10 years earlier they had declared it a crisis, and then it was 52% of all the children being taken from their homes were Aboriginal children. Just 10 years ago, they spent millions of dollars to try to correct that problem. You know what? One of the major findings we found? The caseworkers managing the files spent on average of 57% of their time doing paperwork. The money was spent on micromanaging. And what it caused them to do, the more they thought if they could work with data, they became technocrats about people. And so the caseworkers didn't have the time to go in and do the work. And they were poorly trained. You know, our RCMP, when they have to go and work in an Aboriginal community, they have to go do a 1-week live-in experience in a community. And it's led by Aboriginal elders so that there isn't a fear when they enter into the work, that they can come in with a kind of a calm. And what we found for most of our caseworkers, they'd show up in an Aboriginal reserve, they'd be scared shitless, right? And then they just want to get out of there. And they made bad calls. So that whole idea of how then are we going to bring about change? Are we just going to work harder? We're just going to write another report? And how many of you have sat on committees that you've worked on for months, only for a report to come out of it? Right? And then we lobby for all this money, but we haven't done our work. We don't have a common agenda. We don't have a shared measurement system. We haven't figured out how to work better together. Right? We don't have a governance structure to manage large-scale change. So I'm just asking you, truthfully today, and as we explore for the next 2 days, how are we going to make things better in Vermont? How are we going to tackle the issues that are facing us? We need to find a better way. Now, I've got a workshop right after this called Collective Impact for Newbies and Doubters. Is that what it's called? Yeah, for newbies and doubters. I'm hoping all of you are on the doubter side. You always should be. But when we think about collective impact, it's not new at all. It resonates with you because it's an evolution. We already have been working well together on a collaborative level. We just want more. We've been working together at that collaborative level for years. I was just actually there on Friday speaking in Orangeville, Ontario, and they reminded me that 12 years ago, I had given a very similar speech to the one I'm giving you today. And they formed this large coalition of 17 municipalities called Headwaters Communities in Action. They wanted more. They needed to figure out how to do that. I remember at the time their CEO saying to me, saying to the whole group, there were 17 people in the room, and they were the medical leaders in the community working at wellness and health, and they had been meeting for over a decade. And the CEO of the hospital said to them, look, we've all been meeting together for over a decade, and I like all of you. And the reality is, that we have, I have found all of these meetings very useful. But if you want me to be truthful, I've actually never found them of any use. How many of you have been at these tables over and over again, and they're useful, but you actually haven't done anything together? You haven't changed anything together. Yeah. So what collective impact at its base is asking us to do is have an impact together. That's why it's called collective impact. That's its fundamental message. That we need to figure out how we're going to get results, how we're going to move collaboration into action. And it calls us to that. And of course, so many people out there say, well, common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, backbone organization, those aren't the 5 principles. Well, we just released a beautiful new paper, and I'll pass it on to you if you haven't distributed it already, called Collective Impact 3.0. And we've been sort of scanning and thinking about, okay, if it's not those 5, then what needs to be added? What's the language that we need to bring forth? No one's holding on to those 5 things as being the absolutes. That's not the message. The message is collective impact, getting to an impact together. But let's talk about those 5. Everybody read the John Kanya, Mark Kramer paper, the original one? Hands up, who, people? Okay, about half of you have, okay. Another one that I think is important to distribute, you probably did already, but whether people read them. It's important to read some of this stuff, right? Especially if you're coming to a conference about it. Though if you come to my next workshop, I'll give you the Coles notes. So, one of the first things that we talk about in collective impact, and it's what we learned at the very beginning when we first did this work in Waterloo to reduce poverty, is that we need to come together and we need a common agenda. So what does this common agenda look like? Is it like a strategic plan, but on a community level? Sort of. Is it an engagement strategy? Do we have to engage people from our sectors to build a kind of an energy and a momentum and a commitment to the work? Yeah, that's part of it. Do we need to act together in some way out of this? Like, in a sense, if the plan is going to be written, do our agencies all individually adopt that? So if we're working at reducing poverty, and there are 18 agencies that have joined this collective impact coalition, and we develop a community plan together, do we all need to sign off on the plan? It would make sense if we did, right? For me, what it's come down to after all of these years is that a common agenda is a community consensus. Not an absolute consensus, but it's saying we have explored together. And on average, we find groups spending a year to 18 months getting lost together, learning together, releasing. You know, one of the big, one of the core principles of community innovation is to is to find a creative space collectively and to release some of the things that we've held on to as being sure, right? And in our campaign that I spoke about earlier, we needed to release the word alleviation. We did not think that alleviating poverty was the same as reducing poverty. And when we started to explore what reducing poverty would look like, our actions changed. And now we had to go right back to the key alleviators of poverty, such as food banks. Do you have food banks in Vermont? Soup kitchens. We needed to go back to them, and we helped them to explore how then Do we change the way that we deliver services? Well, our food bank was remarkable. They created a co-op where members, they were members now instead of recipients. The members could voluntarily commit to putting in time at the food bank. I think 69% did. They wanted to help. They picked up food, they distributed food, they set up then a clothing depot, and they set up all kinds of support groups, eventually built a housing complex together. They changed the way that they thought about what their role was when they realized that alleviation was not going to reduce poverty. So the common agenda is just what it says. It's just what it is. It's about the whole community coming together. What's been interesting is that when we've done this right, as we just finished a large process in central Iowa, Des Moines, the money just flows afterwards. Why? Because funders love community consensus. They don't get it in other ways. And so they go, really, you all agree that this is what's supposed to be done, and you've all committed to working together? And that takes us to the second point, the shared measurement system. So we say common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and the backbone organization. So those are the 5 core principles, collective impact. So with shared measurement, so often people come at this thinking that shared measurement is about a measure, right? So now what we have to do is debate the ways that we can measure the plan. But it's not the plan that actually needs measuring. It's really measures at other levels. So the way that when I work with groups, I start on the shared measurement process by saying, go out and talk to all of our partners and ask them what's the information they use to make decisions. That's the first thing that we ask. So they collect all of that data. Then we say, ask them again, but this time ask them what's the information that they would like to have, but they don't have. And if you found that information, give it to them, first of all, because often it's just not being able to source it. And when we asked the first group, we actually were able to create this lovely synergy together. And then what we do with that data is we make it what we call open data or accessible data. We start to share that information as it relates to our issue. So if it's poverty, we start to share the information about what poverty looks like. We have what's called a poverty matrix that we use a lot. And we help people to understand their community in a new way. But you see, just as if we have a common agenda, we need to have a common understanding of the data. We don't all need to become techies around this and experts at understanding data, but we have to popularize the data so that we can understand it not only from a qualitative perspective, but also from a quantitative perspective. And then in doing so, our community plan clearly has measures in it in terms of how are we going to measure if the problem is getting better and where we need to be working and what's working, because we value data. We value the information. And then, in the not-for-profit sector, if you're similar as Canada, we love to say that we value data, but for the most part, we follow our hearts. And my heart is pretty big, and it's pretty smart, right? But it gets fooled often, particularly by my own mental models, my own way of seeing the world. So we need that with us. And the other thing is that there are other people, other sectors, particularly the private sector and government, that is far more interested in data. And so if we're going to broaden it out and bring more partners into play, we need that shared measurement system. But the shared measurement system should not just be seen as a way of evaluating, it's a way of understanding that things are getting better. So now we have a common agenda and shared measurement system, and then we've got that third area called mutually reinforcing activities. Okay? Well, that's collaboration. So, however, I don't even know why they didn't just call that collaboration, but they called it mutually reinforcing activities, and it's just really about working together well, and often working across sectors on the issue. But if you have a common agenda and shared measurement system, do you see how much easier it is to work together well? And if you don't have those, how do you work together well? Right? You purely have to rely on long-term relationships. And though those are important, they're not going to take us to a new place. They're going to keep us where we are. And then we've got the two. So I always say the first two make the work easier, and the last two of working together easier, and the last two make it more effective. And that is, first of all, a continuous communication system. So as we're working together, we need to feed the coalition. We need to feed the collaboration. We need to feed the people that are making this happen. And we need to feed them at various levels. So usually in our common agenda work, we're going to be asking 1,000 or more people what they think about that needs to be done. And we're asking them from all walks of life. We're also asking them to sign up and to stay involved and to keep communicating. And so on that larger macro level, often we get the media involved. I remember during another campaign that we did in Hamilton, which is kind of like your Pittsburgh, steel town, and they had the highest rate of child poverty in Canada. And a year after, as they were still building their common agenda, had not quite released their plan yet, the paper, which is a very large paper, the Hamilton Spectator, took out a Saturday issue of their paper. And the whole front page was blank. All that was on it was the masthead, and in regular print at the bottom, we dedicate this page to the 1,000 of untold stories of people living in poverty. Right? And we apologize. And they put 2 full-time reporters on the beat for the next 5 years. Because they said if our community is going to make this change, we need to know what's happening. We need to know what's going on. And we have a role to play as journalists to help with that continuous communication. So we need to communicate at that macro level and figure that out. We're not always going to get the media on side, but there are ways of doing that, especially today, using the internet. And then we need to also have continuous communication amongst the partners, where we're continually exploring, thinking, becoming creative. Just because we have a plan, a common agenda, doesn't mean that that plan is the plan that we're going to be using for the next 5 years as we run our campaign, right? We need to adjust, right? It's not a one-time shot. We're needing to adjust constantly. Again, I was just working with Des Moines on Tuesday. No, yesterday was Tuesday. It was the day before, Monday. I was working with them on Monday, and we were just coming up to their 1-year anniversary. Well, their 1-year anniversary is April, of launching the plan. So they built the plan over 18 months, and they launched the plan, and they're now months away from their first-year anniversary. And the question is, what do we do between now and then? Do we start working at rewriting the plan? Do we keep rethinking? And then this whole idea of emergence was being discussed, right? Because if we know a year later what we knew a year ago, and that's all we know, we haven't gotten very far. So a year later, we need to ask a whole bunch of questions, right, about what's the change that we're seeing, right? Is our theory of change still accurate here, right? Is it still the same? Has that changed now that we've been implementing, right? And so what does that mean now in terms of what our priorities are going to be next year? And what does that look like? But we need to do that as a collective, because it's not just the plan that's being implemented. What we find is that the partners take the ideas from the plan And they start firing on all cylinders, and they start making changes inside their organizations and all around their spheres of influence. And they start bringing about changes that we start to communicate out. So the plan is just really kind of like the main road. But then all these auxiliary roads are falling off of it. As the main artery, these are the auxiliary arteries. I like that, the auxiliary ones and the main one. It didn't resonate. Okay. And all of those activities start to take place. And that's why the continuous communication is so incredibly important. And then lastly, the backbone organization. And to be honest with you, if I was to say of all the thinking that collective impact has brought to our sector, the role of the backbone organization is the most important. The fact that we have recognized you cannot do large-scale change without having a team to support the large-scale change. And it doesn't mean that the backbone organization is doing all of the work. Far from it. If that's happening, it's not a very good backbone organization, right? But if there are hundreds of us in the coalition and we need support, we need direction, we need to work on policy issues together, we need to raise money together, we need to do all those things together, we need a core group of people to help us with that. So we're now investing in this highly evolved form of a collaboration that's leading us to a collective impact. And that's the hope, is that we will get that outcome. And this staffing role, I always call it just an advanced form of governance, or maybe a solid form of governance for a large-scale collaboration and coalition. So that's essentially what we've learned from our years at this, but coming right out of that early story of understanding that these transactional relationships that we had created and all these wonderful programs that were helping thousands of people, they were not having an impact on the larger system. And people were still becoming poor. Life was not getting better. Our community was not getting better. And we needed to find a new approach to make that happen. That original little city of Cambridge and Waterloo inspired a lot of people. And when we then started talking to other municipalities at the beginning it was a very slow road. Most said poverty was not their issue, and they were not going to be taking that issue on. It was a kind of federal or municipal, provincial. It was more like a provincial responsibility, like a state responsibility, not a community responsibility. They didn't have the means to do it. Today we have 72 cities in the coalition, and they have adopted a goal of 1 million less poor. Our federal government, we've got this good-looking prime minister called Justin Trudeau. You know. And we've been working for years, almost a decade, to try to get the federal government in as a partner. And almost all of our states or provinces now have poverty reduction strategies. All of our big cities, most of our middle cities, even some of our smaller cities. And the federal government refused to write one. And our prime minister just announced, and I was in Ottawa 2 weeks ago, and they have now announced that in 2017 they will launch a national poverty reduction strategy, and it will be a good one. We have just over 3 million people living in poverty in our country. And we know that in the next 5 years, without any more effort than we're currently putting in, we can bring that down by 50%. There is a momentum like we've never seen before. Last March, we were in Edmonton, Alberta, and we had a conference there, Cities Reducing Poverty When Mayors Lead. And all of our major mayors were there, including Naheed Nenshi, this kind of wild Muslim mayor of Texas. Of Dallas. That's our Calgary, huh? Can you imagine that he got elected? It was just amazing. And then after one term, he had 72% popular support. He's just a wild man, you know? But incredibly smart about the way cities should be. He's like a vision. He was just elected mayor of the world. Did you know that there's a worldwide award for mayors? He was just elected mayor of the world. He was there speaking, and of course, as he exits, it was this wonderful moment for us because there was a media scrum that was 26 people, and it went on for almost an hour. This is the power of a collective impact. It doesn't matter what issue you're working on. The issue needs to be addressed at many levels at the community. It needs to be addressed at many levels at the state. And it needs to be addressed at many levels as a nation. And if we're truly going to change the quality of life for the people in this state, we need to figure out a better way. And that's why I am just so pleased to be here and that you are spending 2 days working together on this. And that we're going to explore not collective impact. We're going to explore the Vermont way of collective impact. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.